Welcome to this intro video on building apps with HCL Leap. What's a Leap app? Well, it's as simple as a form with a database table. You simply sketch out the form and the database table is automatically generated. So let's say you want to create a pricing catalog. Let's take a look. From the Manage page, we'll click New Application. We'll create one from blank, give it a name. We'll add a text widget to the top of the page for a title. Then we'll grab a single line widget and we'll change the label to product name. We'll duplicate this and change the second field to product number. And then we'll go grab a currency widget and we'll add price. Save this. Back to the Manage page. Deploy. And then our application is live, and we can test it by going in and entering a record into the form and going back to the Manage page and viewing the data. Leap apps can also have non-form pages, or what we call app pages. Let's add an app page to our app. We'll click the plus sign next to App Pages. We'll give it a name of Home. We'll add a title at the top. We'll call it Pricing Catalog. And we'll go get, at the very bottom, a data grid. And in the data grid, we're going to select the data from the pricing form. We'll stretch that out across both columns. We'll add a link below, and we'll call this New Product. And we'll have this point to the pricing form. And then we'll add a link to the pricing form. So if you want to go back to the home page, you can do that. And for the submit action in the form, we're going to set the redirect to the home page, and we're going to turn off the action completion message. And then finally, we're going to set the home page for the app to the home page that we just created. So we'll deploy these updates and then launch the app. And we see it comes up with the new app page as the home page. We click the link. It brings us to the form. We enter in a new product. It redirects back to the home page. We can double click into a record on the grid and it shows us that record in the form, and then we can click back to the home page. Forms can be created and populated from spreadsheets. If you've already created your app, you can import data from your spreadsheets directly into it. The key is that the column head in your spreadsheet needs to match the ID of the different fields in your form. So you can see the product name here has a ID of F_product_name, and the spreadsheet has the same column head. And this is true with part number and price as well. To import the data from the Manage page, go to View Data, click Import Data, and then point it towards the Excel file that you have, and click through, and you have your data. Now if you're just starting off, you can create your application and import the data directly from the spreadsheet. We'll give it the same spreadsheet. In this case, it doesn't matter what your column heads are. We'll go through all the defaults. It has created the app. If I go to View Data, I can see the data has been imported. Go back to the Manage page, I can launch the form. I see the form has been created. Leap apps can have multiple forms. Let's say you want to build off the pricing information you have by adding a customer form and building out a customer quote app. In this example, we've expanded upon the price catalog by adding an account form and a quote form. The quote form has services that read from the pricing catalog and the account form. We've also added app pages for quotes, pricing, and customers. So let's take a look at the app. I'm going to launch into the home page, which is the customer quote app page. I'm presented with a list of quotes created so far. I can click the link to create a new quote. I see the quote form. There's a couple new concepts here which we haven't covered yet in this tutorial. The first is services, which are used to read information about the customers in the contact. So based on the customer I select, it's populated into this text item here, which is using echo text to present it nicely. And then I'm grabbing some information about the products. And you can see that the quote is formatted nicely, and I can then send this off. Now I'll back out of this and show you that I've conveniently added a customer list link here, so I can go and manage the list of customers, update a customer, add a new one, and in a similar fashion go over to the price catalog and manage this list of products with their prices. The different forms in your app can have different roles and permissions assigned to them. If you go to workflow, like we did earlier with the submit redirect setting, you can also see roles and permission. So what I can do is toggle through the different forms in my app. So you see the price catalog and accounts, and both of these have a default level of workflow where essentially you fill out a new form and it ends up as a submitted record, and then you can update the record. So if I click on Start, over on the right, I'm showing the permissions for Start. So we've defined a role called Pricing Team, and you can see that the permission to create has been turned on for the pricing team, not the sales team, or the administrator in this case. If we go to Submitted, you can see that the pricing team has the ability to read what's there as well as update it. The sales team, though, is going to need to see the pricing, so we've turned on read access, but they're not allowed to change the pricing. In a similar fashion, if we go over to accounts, if we click on Start, we can see that the sales team has the ability to create new accounts, and the sales team has the ability to update accounts, and the pricing team, if they want to read it, they can. We've mentioned the word workflow a couple of times. Well, forms can have workflow. In this case, the customer quote form has a workflow where the quote is created. It then goes to the next stage where the installation estimate is added. It then goes back to the sales rep for review. If the sales rep doesn't like the installation estimate, they can kick it back to that stage and then have it come forward again. And then when the rep is satisfied, they can send it on to the customer. And like we saw before, you can have different roles and permissions for each of these stages. In the app, we can see that the sales team has got the ability to create the initial record. It then goes to the service team. It's got the ability to read and update it. It then goes back to the sales team, and you can see that they've got the pen here, and they can then make some comments, and if needed, kick it back to the service team. And then finally, when it's at the customer stage, you can see that everybody can read it, including the customer. Setting up and modifying the roles is pretty straightforward. You simply just click Create Role, give it a name, and then you determine the membership. And it can be a specific person or group from your directory, a predefined group, or it can be a dynamic assignment which you can make from a value in your form or from a service lookup. Workflow visibility settings allow you to determine what different roles are allowed to see and do in each stage of the workflow. So we want the rep to see certain things at certain stages in the workflow, and we want the services team to see other things at certain stages in the workflow. Well, how do we do that? We do that with visibility settings. So in workflow, if we click on the visibility tab up on top, you're going to see the form, and on the left you'll see a list of pages in the form, and at the upper left you'll see the workflow stages. So in the start stage, which is where the rep creates the form, we see that the sections that are appropriate for them are visible, as evidenced by the eye. If we wanted to turn that off, we could simply just click it. So that's a toggle switch. But in the start stage, the rep doesn't see the scheduling service estimates. That's turned off. But it's just the opposite once it goes to the service team. In the service review stage, you see that this is visible and these others are not. Email notifications are used to orchestrate the different steps in a workflow. Email notifications are sent from the submit action. So we go over to this submit action and click the plus icon. You can see I can set up an email notification. Get into the details of the notification in the body. I'm going to back out of this and look at one that has already been set up. You can see that I've given the email notification activity a name. I'm using a wildcard that I'm able to get to from the insert menu. So I'm sending it to the services team. And then I'm using another wildcard and I'm pulling out the customer name from the form in the subject, and then specifying the body and using a wildcard to link to the form that we want them to go and add the service estimate to. Let's take a look at the workflow in action. Now keep in mind I'm the administrator, so I can play the various roles. Play the role of the sales rep will come in and create the quote. We'll do this for Dickinson PLC. Select the product, an installation level, and then an SLA. Over to services for an estimate. And we can see Dickinson PLC, the stage, the workflow stage is services review. Now services would get an email and they'd get a link to the form and they would just see the installation section. So we can say, well, I'm kind of busy, we're going to push this out to June and it's going to take 6 hours to install, and then off it goes. So now we can see that Dickinson is customer ready. The rep would receive an email and then send it off to the customer. Configure services for your apps to talk to each other. There's a couple of pieces here to consider. The service itself, which you can think of as the link between the data source and the item in your app, and the timing. When does this service happen? Is it pre-populated with the app? Is it something that happens when there's a change event, such as a customer being selected? Let's go back to the app and see how this works. I have the select an account drop-down in the quote form highlighted. If I come over to the properties panel and click edit under options, you can see I've specified use a service to populate the options. And I can see the service configuration if I click into this edit link. The service is a search. So I'm going to the app customer quotes, the form accounts, and I'm searching. There is no input criteria. I want all the accounts. And then under outputs, I'm mapping the account name to the drop-down. A second call is made on the on-item change event to get details on the selected account. The service I use is from the accounts form and it's a retrieve. And the input that I give the service is the account name. And then I ask for information about that specific account. And I put it into some fields which are on a detail page which I never show. But I reference these fields in the body of the quote via insert tags, or what I previously referred to as echo text. Use rules to add dynamic behavior to your form. You may have noticed the stepwise fashion that questions appear for the rep when they're preparing the quote. How does this happen? Well, we use rules. Rules are easy to set up and can be quite powerful. You simply go to the item that you want to control the behavior of. So in this case, I'll click on an entire section, and then you click the rule icon, and then you can add a rule. For a section, your options are either show or hide. Now if I click on a data item, which I've set a rule for here, as indicated by the blue color on the icon, I can see the rule is to show this when the customer name has a value. But data items have additional options. I can enable, disable them, determine the logical condition for when it's valid or not valid, or when it's required. And you can also string together and or conditions to get into some fairly complex logic. So the way the behavior works here is this is shown when the customer name has a value, and then this is shown when the product name has a value, and then finally the last step is shown when the service level has a value. So that gives me that stepwise behavior that I'm after. So we've covered a lot in this short video. The basics on building a form, adding app pages and navigation, using spreadsheets to populate and build forms, how apps can have multiple forms, all about roles and permissions, workflow, email notifications, and using services as well as rules for dynamic behavior. I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you for watching.